This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices in business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Fred Peterson. Fred has a very impressive resume. He's a senior policy advisor for defense, counterterrorism, and intelligence. He will discuss the importance of the Indian subcontinent, which is a very near dear to me. And this topic is very important to our nation and our country, and for that matter, everywhere in the world. Thank you very much for coming for the TV show.
Thank you very much.
I appreciated that very much. So, what do you see the historic and current importance of India in the world?
Well, more than 100 years ago, Admiral Mahan published observations of the continent,
the Asian
continent, and said he who would control the continent must control the Indian Ocean. Now, the Indian Ocean, of course, is dominated by India, not by China, and not by any of India's neighbors. That means China and Pakistan and India being the three, and Indonesia for that matter, and the entire continent is extremely important in terms of course, their economy, of course, in terms of their population, in terms of their three of the countries there now possessing nuclear weapons.
Which is India, Pakistan, China, all of them.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir. And it makes that continent increasingly important, not only in terms of trade and the sea and lanes of communication that and commerce that flow through that continent, the intellectual capital that emanates from India particularly to the world, in fact makes that, that particular landmass vital to the world. And we have, in fact, an existential threat, I believe, that is exigent there, and which needs to be addressed and has far too often in the past received just a second or third tier of interest. It must rise to a very high level of interest of ours right now, since much of the our focus is on the war on terror, as we call it. Much of that has emanated from that region. And,
especially Afghanistan and Pakistan, and both of us, India and United States, both of us share what I consider a common problems in terms of terrorism.
Yes. And
how do you engage Pakistan?
Pakistan is a very perplexing, very difficult question, and it becomes more difficult because of their possession of nuclear weapons.
Correct. And the weak democratic government.
Yes, sir. That was my second point, was that actually what we have had in Pakistan is not a concentration and centralization of power, but now almost an absence, a diffusion, since Musharraf has departed the scene. He was a mixed bag, a mixed blessing and curse at times, but he did have, it is indisputed, a rather strong hold on the military and a strong hold on the country, and at least you had someone with whom you could speak that had an authority to speak for more than just himself.
That's not the case.
That is not the case now, and a consequence of that is that there are pockets of influence in Pakistan that are protected, some of those being very hostile to the interests of peace.
Especially from the ISI?
And within the military itself. Because
I'll make a one statement here. Yes, it seems to me there's a war between the moderate Pakistani as well as the extremist. And the extremism are motivated by the idealism and extremism. And I don't mean to say that in terms of the fact that what is important to America and India to engage Pakistan in a positive manner. It is the interest of the United States as well as India to make sure Pakistan is stable, Pakistan is secure, and Pakistan have a democratic country. It is in our interest.
In those three, I think you put them in the correct order too.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say that if I were a neighbor of Pakistan or a citizen of the world, one of which I am and one of which I am not, there is a cause for very, very great concern. Even prior to the departure of Mubarak from the scene, the political scene,
Mubarak is in Egypt. You mean Musharraf?
I mean Musharraf.
Right.
Pardon me. In fact,
Mubarak is also.
We could make another point there as well that is equally telling, I think.
So what's the
law? The departure of centralized authority. There was, even before that happened, within the ranks of the military, there was a whole generation rising up. We could depend on the generals, but decreasingly be able to depend on the junior level officer corps, because they had been raised under, many of them, under radical
and that's very
education.
Sad. That's very sad.
It's very sad for the world. It's very sad for the region. It's also very sad for Pakistan itself, because there is no reason.
I totally agree.
Pakistan has the intellectual
and
capability.
The potential.
They have.
And they got the young, and they got the young generation
star.
shining. No question. I think you put it very well. How do you perceive is the current state of democracy in India? It's the world's largest democracy.
It is, and Indians properly bear pride. And I have not met an Indian who will not introduce that into the conversation. It's a matter of beaming pride, and justifiably for them. All democracies, the issue I'm making, all democracies have problems within. The United States is still struggling. We have the first black American president, half black, American president now. That is, many of us, whether we agree or disagree with the policies of this president, would embrace the fact that we can elect a president from the votes of all of the people. That is an achievement. But it took us 200 years to do that. And to expect India overnight with a snap of fingers to solve all of their problems, I think is rather quixotic. And to impose the obligation that they do that on them before this or that other agreement is reached with them, I think is placing the bar a little too high, and it's almost an arrogance from the outside world. I think India is doing quite well, and I think that they have the prospects of doing much better. And India is the anchor of civilization in that part of the world,
an anchor of stability,
the anchor of democracy.
An anchor of stability in that region. There's no question about that.
I would say that what is encouraging to me also is to see the increasing degree to which India is enlisting allies in democracy. Korea, Japan, Formosa, the other allies in that region.
Indonesia?
In Indonesia, in fact.
You mentioned that.
Yes, sir. To collaborate with them in the competing vision of a democratic and free people and a free democratic economy in competition with the predations of the neighborhood.
No question. You said it very well. And the Middle Eastern countries can learn a lesson from India's democracy and Indonesia's democracy. Indonesia being a Muslim country, obviously the Middle East is a Muslim
It's a lesson
country.
that can be learned. It's like a book on the shelf.
It is a book on the shelf.
If you want to learn, you will take the book down and read it, consume it.
I agree.
Talk about it with others. Maybe to speak to the author.
Yes.
But if you choose not to learn those lessons, if those lessons are in some way fearful to you or challenging to your vision, you may not even have the book in your library.
I want to shift the gear a little bit to the piece, Fred.
Yes.
What's the outlook for the future for peace and prosperity for short and long term?
If I were to be asked to identify the one region in the world in which the world should hold its breath, it would be in the subcontinent region.
It's the South Asia?
Yes, South Asia. And
what about the Middle East?
The reason I even believe that because of the presence of nuclear weapons in 3 of the major players in that region, it exceeds even the Middle East as a matter of our focus. And coincidentally, from one of those nuclear-armed countries has emanated much of the leadership, and which today protects much of the leadership of those that are instigating within the Middle East. I think it further exacerbates the problem and presents even a heightened interest, as the focus of our primary attention, I think, should be on South Asia. And as for the prospects, I would love to sit here and say I am very optimistic and put on my Pollyanna face and carry my umbrella and fear neither sun nor rain. I can't do that. I think there are some very dire threats. I am disturbed by the instabilities inherent now within Pakistan,
as well as Afghanistan,
and certainly Afghanistan. And when the United States leaves, and it appears as if we may be leaving even sooner than projected, I know people. In fact, I'll be speaking with some tonight, just back from there.
I mean, it is hard for an American to engage in Pakistan and as well as Afghanistan and spend $20 billion per month, and thousands of American lives have been lost, and they're protective of freedom. So we have to figure out whether we can afford a war, the war we cannot afford, war we cannot win, the war we shouldn't be there. That's my take.
I must say that I am not one who argues for empire or argues for willy-nilly deployments around the world. I would say, not necessarily contradicting that, but in observation, that we perhaps have a greater contribution, and this may be a bit controversial, we perhaps have a greater contribution towards stability through presence and peace by having an investment on the ground in that part of the world than we do in Europe. And we have tens of thousands of troops remaining in Europe to what? Protect the Spanish from the French?
Yeah, I don't think so. You're absolutely right, but can we afford, during this troubled time we have in America, unemployment rate is rising, we have a long road to recovery, yes. We're spending $20 billion per month. The question is, thousands of our young men and women have been killed in South Asia. The question
yes.
is, should we continue to engage Pakistan in a positive manner to make sure that
Pakistan or Afghanistan?
Both. We have to engage both of them in a positive manner. And the question for all of us, are we going to stay there? If so, for how long? And that's the question the president has to decide.
I could answer that both ways, and I don't mean to sound like politicians sitting, 20 miles to our east here. However, I would say that the cost of not doing something must also be measured and compared with the cost of affirmative action. The cost of a withdrawal that may be improperly perceived on the part of the region and the world also carries with it an expense. The cost of an engagement, first conventional, with the possibility of escalating beyond conventional, carries a cost to it, to the United States, the region, and ultimately the world. We must measure these decisions very carefully. I believe that our objective should be withdrawal. Further, I believe that our objective should be a much stronger engagement with India, so that India, being the resident of the region, the adult resident democracy in the region, has an opportunity, has a necessity of protecting its, for instance, the power that runs the business and industry, that raises the level of the economy, the fuel that fuels the power.
That's very well said.
And this must be done either through the United States or an allied engagement there. I believe that India has become strong enough and is the right party in the area to strengthen its own regional defense and become a much greater player in that region with its allies.
So what you were saying that with the wealth comes the responsibility as well.
Indeed, it does.
Well, I want to thank you very much for our show. We appreciate you coming by, and it was very interesting to talk with you. And thank you for your vision, and thank you for what you do for our country. And this is our show. This is Frank Eslam wishing you a great week.